I'm Jon Armstrong. I'm the author of Yarn and Gray. This is my writing room. Got some books and Harlem Globetrotters lunchbox from my youth. I thought I'd talk today a little bit about the main character of Yarn. He was a minor character in Gray. He was then known as Mr. Cedar. In Yarn, he's known as Tane Cedar. Because he's actually based a little bit on a real character. In 1984, I went to Japan, Kobe, Japan to be exact, for a year abroad. And I didn't pack very well. Japan was a lot colder than I thought. So at one point, I was just freezing and had to get a coat. I spent a good deal of time looking around for something and finally turned the corner and came across this store that had black, white, and gray clothing and nothing else, and I loved the minimalism. So I went in and started looking around, and I bought a coat, a black coat, and over the next couple of months I went back a couple of more times and bought more things and got to know the owner. His name was Sugimoto-san, or Mr. Sugimoto. Sugimoto means in Japanese, translates as roots of the cedar tree. So that's where I got the inspiration for Mr. Cedar. He was a very nice guy. Told a lot of stories about old Japan. I was interested a lot in katsuobushi, which is a dried fish flakes. I remember him talking about that quite a bit. I have a couple of photos I thought I'd show. This is actually my homestay mom and dad. I spent the year with them. And I almost never saw the dad, as is typical in Japan. The mom was wonderful. Had lots of stories, very helpful with my then terrible Japanese. I actually ended up with a bit of a southern accent in Japan, and when I would speak in Japanese, people would look at me like you would look at a Japanese guy talking like a Texan here, I guess. This is me in the coat that I bought. It was, I had the scarf because I had a coat with kind of a red lining, but that's the coat. You can't see it very well, but I remember it was kind of fuzzy and was mostly black with tiny little white kind of hairs. Remember, this was the 80s. I don't recall how much it was. The clothing in that store in the beginning was fairly inexpensive. I later went back a couple of years and he'd explained that he'd graduated, and so had his clients. That's what he called it. And I got the impression the quality was better and the price was a little higher. And this is a photo from the visit. I went back maybe in the very early 90s. I'm, for some reason, dressed like a bad detective. I don't... Anyway, that's me standing next to him. And in the front there is a worker of his, an assistant. I don't really remember. But my impression of him was that he was like the guy behind the guy, that he really knew a lot about the materials, the fabrics. He'd always show me what was the latest thing. And at that time, double-breasted suits were stylish. And there was a very interesting closure. If you're not familiar with a double-breasted suit, it's that one that the fabric overlaps in front, and then there are two rows of buttons. It's not in style these days. In most of those suits, to close the inside flap, there's a button on the outside here, and you have to kind of work around and get it closed, and it's kind of awkward. In the suits that this Mr. Cedar was selling, I don't know if he designed them, but there was a strap coming from the underarm on this side that went through a little loop, and then it had the buttonhole on it, and the inside flap had a button on it. So it was kind of the opposite, but you would close that, and you could leave it just with the one button, and it would kind of glide and close on its own. It was a really clever system. He would show me those kinds of things and explain why they were superior. And he would also, they would close cuffs on pants, not with a stitch, but a tiny little snap, so you could open it up and take out the accumulated lint. This is his business card, and it says Men's House Group. His store was named Integral, which I think is on one of the places on the back. I guess it was associated with a couple other stores. I'd never visit them and have no idea. But that is it, Mr. Sugimoto.